Hey guys, and welcome to my full spoiler review of Joker 2, Folie. Deux. If you saw my out of the theater reaction, you will know that I was very disappointed with this film. I love the first one and I didn't have expectations of that one, but I came to love it. This one, there were expectations, but at the same time, there was a lot of concerns going in because myself, amongst a lot of people, felt like this was not a needed film. And after seeing it, I can definitely confirm that this was absolutely a mistake to go ahead with. And with that said, we're going to get into spoilers here today. So if you haven't seen the film, make sure to go and watch it before you come back and see this video. Even though I do not recommend this film at this stage, but if you don't want spoilers, go check it out first before you come back. And so let's get started. So Joker Folie Deux takes place right after the events of the first film, which obviously saw Arthur Fleck becoming the Joker. And as a result, he killed a bunch of people and he is now incarcerated or rather in an asylum or Arkham Asylum of sorts. And so that's the end of that film and is left sort of ambiguous as to what's actually real and what's not. But here it is, he's definitely in an asylum and he's being treated as a mental patient. And we're getting to get an exploration at the beginning of how he's dealing with all of that. And meanwhile, he meets Lady Gaga's character, who is essentially a version of Harley Quinn. And she basically eggs him on to embracing his Joker once again. And through that process, it leads to the whole court case portion of this film, which is basically relitigating the events of the first film to determine, was he insane or was he very much in control of what he was doing? Because the ramifications is he could either end up on death row or he could just be sent to be treated in a mental asylum for the rest of his days. And so that's what the whole thing, crux of this film is about. It is about relitigating the events of the first to determine if he is truly guilty or if he wasn't aware of what he was doing in the events of the first film. So that's what it's all about. But obviously intertwined into all of that, he has a budding love story with Harley Quinn, or her name is Lee Quinzel in this film. And at the same time, she's works with in a music class within the asylum. And so that kind of branches off into the musical aspects of the film, which is where they have these kind of duets together throughout the film, singing known songs, I think a couple new ones too, but mostly well-known songs throughout history. And yeah, so I wouldn't say it was a musical as such, but it did have a lot of musical scenes in it. So that's my overall kind of plot summary of the film. And the biggest spoiler here is at the very end, he is killed when he basically denies being the Joker and basically admits that he was in control this whole time, and he basically reverts officially to being Arthur Fleck, not the Joker. And then he is killed by an insane patient at the very end who looks like was the actual Joker, but was not really confirmed or not. But he, after stabbing Arthur Fleck to death, he carves knife scars into his side to bleed there to give the Joker smile. So that's the plot summary there, and we're going to dig into what I liked and what I disliked, which there was a lot more that I disliked with this film. So starting off are the performances. Once again, Joaquin Phoenix knocks it out of the park. Now, I'd argue he has a lot worse material to work with this time because the film is just not as good. But that said, the delivery of his performance is still as phenomenal as the first film. So I'll give credit where it is due. I thought Lady Gaga did a decent job as well. They probably could have used the fact that they were leaning more into the musical aspects with this film. I felt like they underutilized her in that regard. Yes, she's involved in all the musical moments, but she's most of the time, her and even Arthur, they're sort of just kind of whispery singing or kind of groaning their way through songs. It's not meant to be a full-fledged kind of musical singing out loud, projecting their voices. It's very muted in that regard. And I thought that was strange. You got this pop star talent on board who can sing and you didn't utilize her to the best of her ability. So I thought that was strange. But acting-wise, performance-wise, I had no real problems with her. A couple of things more like in terms of the writing of the film, but in terms of her performance, I thought she was fine. And even Brendan Gleeson as well, as one of the security guards at the asylum, I think he was great too. The dynamics he has with Arthur Fleck throughout the film is really great. And he's a great actor as well. So he just brings it, and they could have done more with his character throughout, but the first half of the film, I thought he was a lot better. But then the second half, the story underserved his character big time. And so, yeah, look, performance-wise, no issues with this film. It's as great as the first. Visually speaking, this film is as stunning as the first, and I would even go as far as to say, because there's a lot more kind of emphasis on set design and production design with this film, with all of the musical set pieces, you could say it is visually a bit more stunning, but there isn't quite the iconic moments or shots that the first film has. We think of the staircase scene or on the Murray Franklin show and all of that. there was so much iconography in that first film. This film is still beautifully shot, there's no doubt about it. But yeah, unfortunately, it's the story where it's lacking. But visually, the production design, set design, it's all great. But a question that I will bring up is, so the first film had a budget of around $50 million. This one ballooned to $200 million. Now we know Joaquin Phoenix and Todd Phillips got paid a lot more to come back for this film, heaps more. And obviously bringing Lady Gaga on board is going to cost a lot too. But to increase the budget of this film by $150 million, I don't see where that money went. There's no visual effects in this film, basically. I don't understand where $200 million went with this film. But that said, it still looks really nice on screen for all the practical effects and all that. So yeah, visually it was stunning. As for the actual scenes of this film, there's a few that I'm going to outline that I quite liked in isolation. So the beginning of the film, despite it being a reversion of his character where he basically reverts back to Arthur Fleck, when at the end of the first film he is now embracing being the Joker. So that aside, the opening sequence of this film where we are getting to see him in the asylum, what his daily routine is like, how he deals with the other inmates, the security guards, all of that, I thought was really good. It's really fleshed out and you get a real sense of where he's at now and how he's dealing with his circumstances. And you can kind of understand some of the reversion because they are medicating him. He is taking his medicine, so it's suppressing that inner Joker. So I can get some of that, but it still doesn't quite fit with how the first film ended. But that said, I have no problem with the opening sequence of this film and getting an understanding of how life is for him in the asylum. It's really once Lady Gaga comes into the picture is where I have problems with it. As for the musical moments, this was obviously a big controversial thing when it was announced the second film was going to be a musical. And as I said earlier, this film is not a musical, but it has a bunch of heaps of musical moments. And the distinction there is that in actual musicals, the musical moments are used to further the plot, to create character development, and to basically swap out dialogue for lyrics, for singing. That's basically what a musical is. They are singing words that would otherwise just be spoken. This film, it's like they make progress with an actual scene, just real dialogue and acting, and then they just cut straight away to a musical moment. And the moment, all it is just a lot of it is happening in Arthur's head with things that he's singing duets with Harley Quinn, and it takes you out of the film. In isolation, those musical moments, they're fine. I don't hate them. Some of them are better than others, but the problem with them is that they don't service the story or the plot in any way. You think about the first film when it's revealed that all of the scenes that he had with the woman that he thought he was in love with, they all turned out to be not true. That helped inform the plot and his character development because we got to see his true psychosis and the build-up of him becoming the Joker. Here, it didn't service anything. It was like cutting from one film to go to another completely different film at times, jumping back and forth between the dialogue scenes and the musical scenes. And it didn't flow whatsoever. But in isolation, I can give credit, as I said before, to the production design, to the visuals, all of that. And some of the music was nice to listen to in isolation. But undoubtedly my favorite scene of the whole film, and I think is a genuinely great scene, is the scene between Arthur and Gary Puddles. So if you don't know who Gary Puddles is, you'll remember from the first film, the midget who Arthur spares when he kills the other man with him who was his bully. He spares the midget's life when we think he's going to kill him. So this comes back here during the court scene, the second half of the film. Towards the end, Gary Puddles is brought in as a witness to take the stand and to give his testimony on who he thinks Arthur is. And it's a truly heartbreaking scene because we get to see the other side of the coin, basically, of that scene from the first film about how Arthur spared him, what that meant to him in many ways, because we get to see Gary talking about on the stand how throughout his career as a clown, amongst the other clowns that they worked with, the only one who didn't bully him or make fun of him for his size was Arthur. And yet Arthur was the most psychologically deranged of all of them. Yet despite that, he still treated Gary nicely, or rather just didn't say anything bad to him or ever hurt his feelings. So, and he's talking about that on the stand, and he's talking about that was a thing for him in his life as a marginalized person within society, being a little person. Having Arthur around as someone who didn't make fun of him gave him a glimmer of hope. So to see the moment when Arthur kills that other man, who was the other clown, in his apartment in the first film, it's shattered his world completely, because Arthur was one of the few people, if only, who never made fun of him for being small. And to see that very man being a complete psychopath who killed a man so violently, and he was genuinely threatened for his own life for a moment too. He showed that it's affected him psychologically now. He says he can't sleep. He's breaking down all the time. All of this, it's really deep stuff, really great. And when that scene happened, I couldn't help but think, where the hell was this for the rest of the film? Why didn't we get more of this type of themes played out throughout the rest of the film? There is a whole story you can tell there about this ethical conundrum, about a man who was nice to a little guy, but also is a psychopath. Play more on that. Don't go down this musical path for no reason. There was so much that scene showed to me the potential we could have had with this film. It made me realize, okay, there was a way that they could have done this film despite no one wanting a sequel, and yet they blew it. But in isolation, a great scene, really emotional and really thought-provoking as well. And now we get to the aspects of the film that I disliked. And my main gripe with this film, and I said this in my Out of the Theatre review, is that it is re-litigating the events of the first film. Literally, we are spending this whole film talking about what happened in the first one. It's like, what a waste of time. I came out of the cinema not hating this film, not like angry, more just like I felt like a waste of time. Like I just wasted my time, because we knew everything that happened in the first film. And not only did it relitigate the events, but it relitigated them and then created an outcome in this film that was so underwhelming, where he basically reverts back to being Arthur before being killed at the very end. So it's complete waste of time and nonsense. And I mentioned this in our theater review too. The director, Todd Phillips, he did The Hangover. What was The Hangover 2? It was the same film as the first one, just in a different setting. And he's kind of done the same thing here, where he's just really resting on his laurels and being like, okay, people love the first film. Let's just talk about that for 2 hours and people will enjoy this. It's like, no. And there were parts of this film that were ambitious, especially the musical aspects. But in this regard, choosing to just focus on what happened in the first film was a complete missed opportunity and very lazy writing. And as I said, and to go into this further, this regresses the character of Joker. At the end of the first film, he's now embraced being the Joker for better or worse. But this one now, he's basically, the only one basically egging him on to be the Joker is Harley Quinn. But him on his own is not really wanting to go there, but he's doing it for her because he loves her. But then when that all kind of falls apart for him towards the end, and he realizes that this was all a mistake, seeing that the anarchy and chaos he's caused as a Joker, he just reverts back. It's such an underwhelming character development, plot, progression of a character. No one wanted to see that. We wanted to see a film where he is the Joker now. Forget Arthur Fleck. We saw Arthur Fleck, that his journey ended in the first film. This film should have been the continuation of the journey, and could have been the ending as well of the Joker. You could still have a tragic ending for him, but make it about him being the Joker, growing his strength amongst Gotham, growing his personality, growing a following. All of this stuff could have been all about that. Instead, it was just this nonsense back and forth between the Joker and Arthur Fleck, where he reverts all the way back to Arthur by the end of the film. And it's really just so disappointing to see. And this whole film, you're waiting for some sort of big moment, something epic, something for him to really cut loose and unleash as the Joker. And it just doesn't happen, because most of the times when he is being the most flamboyant, it's all happening in his head. We don't get that awesome moment on the steps or on the Murray Franklin show. It's such an underwhelming ending, because it's building to, and then it's to nothing. It's so disappointing. And this to me says that they feel, I genuinely believe here that the makers of this film took the wrong lessons from the first film. They saw the following and the love that people had for the Joker in the first film to be problematic, and they wanted to undercut that completely. They wanted to neuter him and basically say, no, it is wrong to love him. You need to accept him as Arthur Fleck. So we're going to bring him back to Arthur, and you're going to enjoy that. Well, we're seeing that people are not responding to that. But in terms of the things I could list that I disliked about the film, it's very much just in the overarching structure and the story. And it takes too long to get going. The first half of the film is just about building his relationship with Harley Quinn. The second half is just a court procedural, really. There's no real pacing to it. And on top of that, the musical moments constantly break up any sort of momentum that the film gets. It's completely undercut by a musical scene that means nothing to the overall film. So my overall thoughts on Joker Folie à Deux is that visually, the film looks really nice. It's really well acted, but the story is just ridiculous and should not have been done. I've never seen as big a mistake possibly with a sequel film to a first film that is beloved. Like it was an absolute mistake. You can see sequels that try something that are like a good story but just not well executed. This one is executed like you can see the people making this film are competent, but the story just wasn't there. So it was like executing nothing. So it's an absolute mistake to have this film, and it proves everyone's worst fears about what they had about this film, really. And you know, most of us were wrong about the first film, but I think a lot of us have been proven right with this one. This should not have been made. It was an absolute mistake, and they're gonna see with the end box office with this film, whatever it turns out to be, it's gonna be a disaster. And it's a shame because this tarnishes the legacy of the first film. I really believe that. If you treat this film as canon, then it absolutely undermines the first film. If you want to enjoy the first film now, you have to pretend this film does not exist. That's the only way you can enjoy the first one, because this one seeks to undermine it at every turn. And so with all this considered, the aspects of the film that I did like versus the massive issues that I have with it, I'm going to give this film what I think is a very generous 4 out of 10. And to be clear, those 4 points that I'm giving it are very much based in the superficial aspects of the film, the visual aspects, how the actors look and how they portrayed their roles, how the sets looked, all of that. But otherwise, the rest is just a mess. And so I can't give this a passing mark of which would be a 5 out of 10. This is a 4 out of 10 for me, and I think that's generous. Anyways, guys, that's my thoughts on this one. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. What did you think of Joker Folie à Deux? Did you like it? Did you hate it as much as I did? Whatever it is, I want to hear them all. Thanks for watching this video. I appreciate it, and I hope you can like and subscribe to my channel, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.